Welcome back to WagerTalk.com. I'm joined in studio by my normal partner in crime, Brian Leonard. And Brian, we're going to break down the Super Bowl, get your thoughts on it. We've had quite a assortment of talent in here today, breaking down the game and giving some props. So we're going to kind of do the same with you. I know we spent the weekend up in Reno. We were hoping to be able to pick off some props, but they decided to hold back a little bit before they brought the props out, and we were already leaving town before they did it. So we just had to gamble and eat while we were up there. Yeah, but Brian, what were your initial thoughts when you saw the line come out? And we all know that you could have bet this game at 2.5 or 3 prior to the championship games 2 weeks ago. And then, of course, once we saw the Carolina blowout, the line started to take off.
Well, as we talked about on the videos we did 2 weeks ago, New England was favored to be 1-point favorite over either entry from the NFC. Mm-hmm. Either entry from the NFC was going to be 3 points over Denver. So we were sitting there, we're watching the games, and all of a sudden Carolina's looking great. And the line starts coming out 3, 3.5 in places that are offshore, some of us can't bet into. And we just saw the tidal wave coming, and you knew, and we've talked about this before for like Monday Night Football, the last thing you see is what people are going to overreact to. So everybody just saw Carolina looking great and Denver struggling to get past New England. So you saw the initial money coming in on Carolina, but when you think about it, you had Carolina. We sat here last week with Scott. We talked about the injury to the quarterback, Palmer, for Arizona. It was clear his long passes were not accurate, and of course he gets picked off 5 times or something. It was pretty
crazy.
Total
7 turnovers in the game.
Yeah, so Arizona was playing without their quarterback that was there most of the season. And when I just go back to what we talked about a minute ago, with New England was a 1-point favorite over anybody, well, Denver beats New England. So a lot of people are looking at the Carolina side and saying, yeah, they've been really impressive, but nobody's paying attention that Denver beat, if it was number 1 seed in college basketball or whatever, this would have been the number 1 seed going into this. So I think there's some value now on Denver. It hit 6, it starts to come down now. If it was 6 again, I think that's where you want to go. And let's just take a look at some of the things that have happened in past Super Bowls. Denver right now, the number 1 overall defense. Carolina is very good also. But the number 1 overall defense going into the Super Bowl are 7-2 straight up. The better defense in the Super Bowl has won 40 of the 49 Super Bowls. So you got both those things going for you. You also have public perception on Carolina. I think Denver could be a little bit undervalued here.
We had Gil Alexander on earlier, and when I did his podcast, he brought up a stat via a good friend of yours and mine, Mark Lawrence. Mm-hmm. And we know Mark has a great database that goes back at 1986. And he brought up the fact that whenever a playoff team scores 40 or more points in the last game, they're just 4-23-1 against the spread in the next game. And Carolina definitely went over 40 points in their last game. That sets them up for failure in this one if you like to go with history. And it's one of those stats where everybody says, we don't like trends. You got to look at what we've got going right now. Look at the teams. But that trend makes sense to me, because what happens is if you have a blowout, everybody saw that blowout. They saw that team put up all those points. So what you're getting in essence is the dog is going to be, there's going to be value, because people are going to overvalue Carolina, which is exactly what you're saying here. And anytime, I like to use the saying, defense wins championships. That's a cliche. People always use it, but it's true. The defensive teams do win the championships. And Denver, in my opinion, has the better defense. Everybody's saying that the defenses are comparable stat-wise, but the difference that I'm going to say between the two is Carolina's defense has got to play downhill most of the season. They've had big leads in over half of their games. Denver, because the way the offense is built and because the problems they had with Manning this year, they were in close games all year. So you're playing meaningful points. How many times have we talked about stats where somebody will bring up, I look at first half stats because it's meaningful. Both teams are in it, where things can get shaded in the second half because it's skewed. The game's out of reach, whatever. Denver, all of their games, for the most part, none of them have been blowouts. So I like their defensive numbers way better than the Carolina numbers.
And another stat that's similar to what you said about Marks, what's going on with Carolina is if teams win by 30 points or more before they go to the Super Bowl, those teams are only 2-7 straight up in the Super Bowl. And in regard to Carolina, Carolina's played the weakest defenses in the NFL this year. Obviously, they're in a bad conference, but Tampa Bay's defense isn't any good. Right. New Orleans. So you go by, they've played all season long. They've had the easiest schedule of defenses they have faced. Now they're facing the number one defense in the NFL.
Do you have one prop you'd like to share with the listeners?
Well, we've had some great props in here, guys that I respect, handicappers. We also have guys from the sportsbook side. I'm glad the sportsbook side guys have already left because I'm going to tell you what not to bet in the Super Bowl. One of the things that you don't want to bet is anything that has more than two outcomes. A lot of people like to bet who's going to score the first touchdown. A lot of people like who's going to win the MVP, all these other stuff. There's so much juice involved in these props. You're never going to get your right cut on these games. So avoid who's going to score the first touchdown and all that stuff, or what the first touchdown is, those kind of things. So you want to go with two outcomes: yes, no, over, under. And when you start off the week, you want to bet the overs. If you like an over, you want to bet it as soon as the lines come out. Because let's face it, everybody who watches the game wants an exciting game. They want a lot of scoring. You want to root for your players. You want to root for your team. The last thing you want to do is root for unders and root against players. So people will get ahead of that. So what you want to do is bet unders, and you want to bet them later in the week. That's after everybody's already bet the overs. You come in with the unders. And you also want to have more unders in your portfolio than you do overs. Unders win at a higher percentage than overs. And Chris had talked about this a little bit for the money line props. You want to have more minus money line props than plus money line, because anytime you're betting the plus, unless it's something strange like singing the national anthem or whatever that Gil had talked about, you're not going to get full value. So I like to have a lot of minus props out. Will there be a missed extra point? Minus 360. I know you don't want to hear this one. Will there be a safety? Minus 700 or less. Will there be overtime? So those are the kind of things that you want to have a lot of minuses, because nobody wants to put. I bet no missed extra point one time, 1,600, minus 1,600 to win 1,000 or to win 100, and at that point the kickers hadn't missed a field goal or missed an extra point all season, but they had to miss one in that game, and it was a game in which there was like 8 touchdowns. So I was really freaking out. So you talked about your situation in the hospital. If you bet these, you may want to be a little bit mellow.
Yeah. Well, a little bit different though too. Don't forget this year with the extra points pushed back, that changes things dramatically.
It does change a little bit. Yep.
All right. We appreciate that. Throw a score at us.
I'll go 23-20 Carolina.
23-20 Carolina. All right. There you have it. Brian Leonard, a friend of Wager Talk, and always you can see him weekly with our normal videos. And don't forget, check out the Weekend All Access. You can pick your favorite capper, get all of their plays, football and basketball, all weekend long, $69. That's Thursday through Monday. We'll be back with more stuff here at wagertalk.com.